I thought hard about how I wanted to go about this, whether it was worth making a lot of noise for the sake of clarity, or instead candidly saying it outright, hoping people would understand its brevity. In my personal experience, I found that unless people are really passionate about something, chances are they will remain passive, say nothing at all, and be content with justifiable ignorance. So I couldn't believe it would be okay to assume that anyone who would see my message on Facebook would feel that sort of passion towards me, to drop everything, immediately read what would initially seem like a much ado about nothing update, and then reply with heartfelt support or indirect disgust, as such a message would undoubtedly stir up. And I don't believe I'm wrong for doubting, regardless of how many friends Facebook says I have. So, in the midst of my apparent pessimism, I had a brilliant epiphany. Since people prefer not to read anymore, why not just be the voice actor I am and record it? That way, no one can say it was too long, didn't read. Only time will tell if my plan worked. But then I had another epiphany. Why not share this in the spirit of a TED Talk? That way, instead of just talking at you, I'm engaging you, the listener, in a personal experience. To teach and to educate those who may not be familiar with what I too barely knew about just a few years ago, and would eventually come to understand for myself. I knew I wanted to do this right, once and for all. I remember when an actress I know, not saying any names, came out publicly as a lesbian. It was a brief and honest announcement laced with her usual wit and humor. I also had a chance to witness the outpouring of support from her fans and people who valued her as both a friend and an actress. The announcement came and went, and everyone got on with their lives. But for a while I wondered, could coming out always be as natural and simple as that for everyone? Maybe, but probably not. I'll get to why I think that way later in my talk. Society, mainly my generation and the ones after, have, for the most part, embraced the existence of gay men, lesbian women, and bisexuals, with some leeway given to the asexual, queer, and almost everything in between. It's become socially acceptable, though still tolerable in some circles, to proudly wear your sexuality on your sleeve. And there is more national support than ever before, 20 states as they're prepping for this talk, to have the legal right to marry someone who just so happens to have the same two sex chromosomes as you. Speaking of biology, let's talk about mine for a moment. My two sex chromosomes happen to be XY, which means I was born with a penis, which also means that a doctor assigned me male at birth, which then means that my family, friends, and society at large expected my gender to be one and the same as my sex, even though gender and sex are two separate things. Notice how myself, and the rest of us for that matter, rarely have any say in how we identify and are raised according to what according to what biology gives us between our legs. Everything regarding sexual orientation and sexual orientation and gender identity. That is, what biology says how we're supposed to reproduce and what society says we're supposed to be, is highly policed and typically assumed to be self-explanatory. And assumptions have a tendency to make an ass out of you and me. Male is to female, as black is to white. Any gray deviation from that, how should I call it, from that neat little gender binary may cause social ostracism and even death. That's how the majority of us are socialized to believe, and this needs to change. The truth is that while humans are easily categorized XX or XY, gender is not so simple. Gender is this nebulous and fluid spectrum by which we use to define and determine our personal identity for ourselves. This covers both gender presentation, how we look and dress outwardly, and gender identity, how we think and feel in our minds. So let me say something that has been said by many others before me and will probably challenge the mindset of some of those listening. Gender is, in fact, not defined for us at birth by a medical specialist or our parents. Gender is something that we establish for ourselves in our own minds that we believe is right for us as we mature. And once in a while, a human being in all their biological, neurological complexity that baffles scientists to this day may come to the sometimes difficult conclusion that their biological sex and their gender identity do not align, that their body is betraying how they see themselves on the inside, or how they may feel most comfortable presenting outwardly, or both. This misalignment is neither a defect nor a mental disease. It's the same as how many of you have never questioned your identity as a male or female and feel perfectly comfortable presenting within your XX or XY sex. It's just who you are, right? Except for one thing. There are many individuals, thousands of individuals, who have, did, or are questioning. To them, something is off. They may feel uncomfortable or distressed with the sex they have been assigned, or the gender that everyone automatically proclaims them to be based on how they look. Sometimes those who do not conform have been called sexual deviants, oddities, liars that don't belong in our society. They have been often discriminated against, been denied basic human rights and healthcare, maligned in entertainment with demeaning portrayals, and even assaulted and murdered in fits of unreasonable rage, many of which have gone unpunished or undocumented. A shame how our gender identity and presentation affects everyone we know and everyone we don't know, when it should only be about us. So me coming out to you as a transgender female in this moment may have a similar effect on you. Probably just enough for you to remember why I asked the question earlier, could coming out always be as natural and simple for everyone? And probably just enough for you to remember that my answer was maybe, but probably not. It has often been said that people fear what they don't understand. This rings especially true for those of us who identify under the umbrella transgender. What I detail is just a small portion of the painful stories and the real hardships transgender people face daily. So, how does my story fit into all of this? Well, at the start of 2012, I began soul searching and looking long and deeply at all the things I had been suppressing and experiencing throughout my life. All the pieces didn't fall together immediately, but once I accepted the fact that I had been lost in perpetual self-loathing for much of my life and had been merely adapting to the unwanted changes which assaulted my body year after year, I arrived at a conclusion. I was and had been extremely unhappy, and no amount of success, relationships, or prayer would fix me. I hated my reflection and how the world assumed that I should feel okay with being male and everything, all the privileges that came along with that. I didn't and couldn't truly love myself. Some of you know that I've been pursuing a professional voiceover career and have taken theater acting classes. What you may not know is that I struggled with making my voice public because that would instantly brand me as male when I'd spent the majority of my online life known as androgynous, queer, or assumed female. As long as I wasn't identified as male, I was very happy with that. But obviously, that was not conducive to pursuing a professional voiceover career. Eventually, for the sake of my own ambition to succeed, I took the red pill. In late 2008, I began my journey. I said goodbye to what little of my identity I held on to. That part of my being that felt most real and honest to me on the inside was replaced with a cold reality. With my voice public, I had no reason to hide my face either. Like I had done for much of my life, I settled for the man in the mirror because that was the only way I believed I'd ever find success. Continuing to adapt to something I didn't want, progressively made me miserable, year after year. This is the last individual photo of me taken, dating back to 2012. Coincidentally, it just happens to be a professional headshot back when I had thrown myself into theater acting. My utter discomfort throughout this photo session was all of my frustration, disdain, and unhappiness condensed throughout my life, condensed into just a few hours. This photo represents the masculine front I subjected myself to out of fear, believing that I had everything to lose by being anything but. For the longest time, even especially throughout college, I had felt like an actor on a stage. And my training as an actor only served to make that simple fact clearer than day. This was not the real me. And I couldn't be truly vulnerable in my acting because I hated myself while telling myself the same lie over and over. I am okay. Eventually, I did what any person who has to tell themselves repeatedly that they're okay does. I began seeing a therapist, one with LGBT certification. I needed clarity from someone with more knowledge than I thought I had about myself. After embracing the possibility that my gender identity was different than my birth sex, I was terrified of what this new knowledge of being transgender would destroy. My life, my career goals, what little connection I have with my family, the person that I built up all of these years was now all at risk. I was scared that maybe I'd get it wrong. I was also scared that I wouldn't be able to handle the backlash on my life, which had been difficult enough for me to survive as it is. Finally, I figured out the source of my problem. I was sacrificing my well-being and love for myself for a painful lie for the sake of everything and everyone but me. I couldn't and wouldn't do that anymore. I didn't ask for this. And anyone who claims that people like me chose this has never truly tried to understand how deep this goes. The only choice that I made was to stop lying and quietly hating myself. Now, Now I'm no longer as afraid or restrained as I used to be. I'm happier. I feel happier with myself. I've opened up on the inside, which is translated into how people I've opened up on the inside, which is translated into how people perceive me on the outside. I say more of what's on my heart, and I basically am becoming a much stronger person every time I come out. I needed this, and it is in that completeness that I'm able to come out to you as a transgender female, the female that I've always been. I'm still the same person I've always been, just special in her own way, and no longer a slave to herself or society's definition of the gender binary being the norm. To conclude, I have a few confessions to make. To those of you in my social circles, I deliberately cut myself off from most of you to avoid creating any further memories that will be reinforcing the shell that I never wanted any part of. You probably didn't notice or care very much at all, but I'm sure the majority of you will be able to decide for yourselves whether or not to retain contact with me. For those who choose to support me, thank you. And I look forward to reconnecting with you sometime soon. My second confession has to do with people who may be wondering what this means for me as a voiceover artist. I'll let my animation demo speak for itself. Enjoy.
Black Rock Shooter Cross Vocaloid.
I know that all I am is a reminder that you and Mom were once drunk enough to think that having sex was a good idea. That depends on what kind of service you're looking for. Maybe we can help.
Your father knows I don't want to harm you, but you leave me no choice, boy.
Your ears will bleed, your mind will turn to pudding, and then I will drink it. I will drink it and learn your secrets.
Have a taste of my Spyro sword technique, monster!
But every little girl wants to become a magical girl and have a wish come true.
Yes, it was me. I must say, I expected him to be somewhat broken after that ordeal, but no! I underestimated him. It'll make him much more fun to break later on.
Warning, warning. All personnel must leave the restricted zone N-03.
Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I should limit my potential to be successful in the voiceover industry by giving up on roles that require male tones. I'm just like Nancy Cartwright or Veronica Taylor, just with a flipped range and not nearly as amazing. Being transparent about my gender identity as it relates to my voiceover career was another difficult mental hurdle for me. I feared that my reputation would be tarnished, or that I would be quietly discriminated against for my gender identity by being barred from casting opportunities. But thanks to a few talks that I had with a trans girlfriend of mine, I made a simple decision to become so good, valuable, and hopefully liked in the industry that casting directors won't be able to ignore me. My last confession has to do with those listening who, like I was, might be struggling with their identity, or may just not have the will to love themselves. You might be saying how strong or brave I must be to basically permanently out myself as trans. Believe me when I say that is not the case. We all search for that inner strength to carry on day to day. But if we don't love ourselves, then we aren't truly living. And if we're not truly living, then our capacity to be brave and strong and vulnerable become greatly diminished. I'm only just recently learning how to do this because I too learned a valuable lesson. No one, not your family, not your friends, not your lover, and not society, should ever keep you from being happy and loving yourself, no matter what form of self-actualization that may take. I'd like to hope that one day humanity will reach a level of enlightenment that celebrates the deepest complexities of of humans as a whole, that makes us human. That even in the midst of lacking understanding for each other, we can connect with one another intellectually and emotionally in ways no other species can. And so I've included links below for those who would like to learn more about the T in LGBTQA. I believe it's imperative that that resources are made available to those who are on the outside, to educate and empower them, so that they are aware of the atrocities we face, and to possibly even garner more genuine allies of the LGBTQA cause. Most importantly, however, I want to be a reminder that just like many of you are more than your gender, trans people are more than their gender too. And so let me come out to you properly. Hi, my name is Nina. I am a professional voiceover artist, creative director of Ether Future, manga writer, graphic designer, EDM lover, casual cosplayer, longtime anime geek, human being, and friend. Thank you for listening.